once again. Myself, Apuranandi, I welcome you to Abhigyan Academy. So, we were doing with the economics lecture series. We have learned various topics in our earlier videos. So, today again, I have brought you a very interesting concept of economics subject. So, here you can see in the screen that there is a graph. Okay, there are certain terms written axes are written. So what is this? So today in this video we will know the concept of the economic cycle. This is the economic cycle, which is also known as the business cycle or the trade cycle. Now, or you can say the names that I have written here are the names of the different phases of economy. Like say for example, expansion, boom period, recession, depression and recovery. So one by one we will see what are this. So before that, another thing we will see ki this is y-axis. The y-axis is representing the GDP and the x-axis is representing the time, the period. Now, what do we mean by GDP? GDP is the value of all final goods and services produced within the country. That key in a country, in the inside the territory of a country, whatever goods and services have been produced, the final goods and services which are produced, the value of it is known as GDP. Or you can say GDP is also the income generated within a country. What I said, the GDP is the total income generated within a country. The x-axis is representing that, and the time that the x-axis is representing the period, the time, the years, the months, whatever, whatsoever. Now, here another thing, we know that GDP is calculated quarterly every year. Means every quarter GDP is calculated. That means every 3 months the GDP is calculated and published in a country. Now, the rate at which, the rate, that means I'm talking about a percentage. Now, the rate at which GDP grows every quarter or every time period is known as the growth rate, is known as the growth rate. Say, for example, in quarter one, GDP was 100, and in quarter two, GDP is 150, and in quarter three, so GDP is 210. Then the growth rate here will be, say, it is the plus 50, it is plus 60. So the percentage that is increased, so here by 50% it is increased, it is known as the growth rate. All right. Now, let's see what is expansion. In expansion, you see the graph is going upwards. The graph is going upwards. Here, GDP over a period of time is increasing. Is not only increasing, but it is also increasing with a increased growth rate. Means the percentage at which the GDP is growing every quarter is also increasing. So that phase is known as expansion. Along with this, we can also conclude the demand in an economy is also having an upward trajectory. The income, because demand is in an upward trajectory, demand is increasing, that also implies the income of people is also increasing, or the money supply is also increasing. Hence the inflation in that economy during that period will also be higher. That type of phase in an economy is the expansion phase. Now, when an economy keeps on expanding and reaches a period where all the resources were employed, means whatever available resources there was, whether it is labor or capital, that was completely employed, possible employment of all the resources have been done, and the In that period, the economy is having the highest GDP of that period of time, or highest possible GDP of that time, then that period is known as the boom period, where in a particular period of time of 100% employment of resources, including labor, the GDP, the highest GDP, that phase is known as the boom period of an economy. Next, when in an economy the GDP starts falling, suppose the GDP was 200, then the GDP start falling, say 180, then again GDP fell to 150. That means the growth is now negative. The growth is rate is negative. Now, in subsequent two quarters, quarter one, quarter two, or quarter two, three, or four, three, four, in any subsequent quarters, when you notice a negative growth rate, then that and then that phase of an economy is known as recession. Okay, recession here, GDP does not grow, GDP falls. The growth rate turns to be negative, concludes demand is low, income is lower, money supply in that economy will be low, and inflation will be technically lower. That phase is known as recession. Now here, in another slide you see, there are again two terms. One is slowdown and another one is stagnation. Now let me explain you what is slowdown. So again in quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, and quarter four. Say in quarter one the GDP was 200. In quarter two the GDP is 250. Here GDP has increased. Yes, the GDP has increased here. In quarter three the GDP is 280. And in quarter four, the GDP is 300. Here, in quarter three and four, also GDP has increased. Now, look into the growth. In from quarter one to quarter two, the GDP growth was plus 50. In from quarter two to quarter three, the GDP growth was plus 30. And from quarter three to quarter four, the GDP growth was plus 20. So, here you notice that the GDP has grown, but the growth rate has fell. So here in slowdown, you will notice the GDP is growing, but the growth rate is falling, not negative. Growth rate here is not negative, rather it is positive, but it is decreasing. So here, this phase where GDP is growing and growth rate is falling and growth rate is positive, this situation is known as economic slowdown, where the economy is growing but at a slower pace. धीरे धीरे the economy is slowing down. Now stagnation. What does stagnation mean? Stagnation means stagnate. It is not decreasing, neither increasing. Say in the subsequent quarters, the GDP was 300. It is again 300. In again next quarter, it is again 300. But there may be a very negligible increase. 301, 302. That could be a negligible increase. So where the economy stagnates, the GDP is fixed. The GDP fixes. The growth rate is also fixed. GDP also fixes. The economy does not grow. That situation is known as stagnation. Okay. This slowdown and stagnation, they generally comes before the phase of recession. Ki, when recession is to arrive, just before that slowdown or stagnation may occur. Now, when this recession persists for a longer duration, 2 quarter, 1 year, 2 year, the recession is it is very great. It went from 1 or 2 quarter to multiple quarters. Then that recession will turn into a severe form, which is known as the depression, where the economic activities fell below the normal level. And the last one, when the economy starts moving upward from a recessionary phase or a depressionary phase, that is known as recovery. Here again, GDP will expand, growth rate will expand. But that phase will be known as recovery phase, because until this level, this is the potential. We have seen the economy. Until this level, until this level, if the economy does not grow, this phase will remain as recovery. After that, again, expansion will start. So these are the different phases of economy. Let me just conclude it. Ki expansion, GDP and growth rate both increases with an increasing rate. In boom period, it is the highest possible GDP of a period. Then we have seen slowdown. Slowdown, here GDP increases but the growth rate decreases. In stagnation, GDP and growth rate both fixes. They're both fixed. Next comes the recession where GDP declines because of a negative growth. And when the recession takes its severe form is known as depression. And when the economy again starts moving upward is known as recovery. All right. So in this video, we have seen the different phases of an economy. And again, in the next phases, we will see the different types of recovery. So we have seen the different phases of economy. Next video, we will see different types of recovery. There we will see K-type recovery, V-shaped recovery, L-shaped recovery, W-shaped recovery. What are those? That will be only focused upon this particular phase recovery. I hope this is clear to all of you. So from my side, best of luck to all of you. Thank you.